fine.
All
This
right,
meeting is being recorded.
you're up.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I gotta put
my favorite book of all time is The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm, Fromm. He was a psychoanalyst way back in the day. But he described love in a way that I had never heard expressed before. He said that love is something you learn how to do. It is not passive, it is active. And just like you learn how to be a carpenter, a bricklayer, a teacher, a doctor, or anything else, you have to learn the theory. Then you go, and once you master the theory, then you go into the practice. And then once you start your practice, that's a never ending process. And then he goes on to describe what he considered to be the key components of love, the things you have to learn how to do. And it was caring, sharing, giving, knowledge, and there's one more. Can't think of that other one. By the way, where's Nikiva on her birthday? She stole my book. I know Nikiva walked out of here with my book. But anyway, he went on to define each one of those things. What is caring? What is giving? What is sharing? What is knowledge? And all of that. And then once you understood what all of that was, then you begin to practice. And you could probably, I felt like anything that you said you love, you could test it with those 5 things. And if those 5 things didn't work, you're really not in a love situation. You're really into what they call a symbiotic relationship. And oh man, I tell you, I read that whole book, went out and got the large print version. That's what Nikiva stole. And I had that thing. I even gave it to a couple of the grandkids, some excerpts from it for them to read so that they wouldn't go out there and get duped by some fast talking somebody that didn't mean them any good, right? But I would put that at the top of my list as far as it's not a novel. It's just a book. I'm not sure. I never was really into reading novels. I mean, I've read some, but none of them sticks out in my mind as something that I really wanted to read. But poetry, I love poetry, but I like old poetry. I guess you can call it old poetry. I'm not so sure that I'm into this free verse type of poetry that they have going on now. But I recognize that all of the older but goodie songs that I love so much are all poetry. Those older but good songs, if you really sit down and listen to them, they're all nothing but poetry because they rhyme. All the little sentences and things, they just rhyme, just like poetry. And they have a lot of meaning in them, you know. I guess I don't know. I guess I really do I like poetry. But now that I have a lot of time, I don't read anything. I don't read poetry. I don't read books. I don't even read the newspaper. I'm sitting up here looking at TV rather than getting myself into some books that I was supposed. You know what I really did like though reading when I was in college? I like reading the classics. I like reading the Greek classics. I like reading Homer, and all of those things that I was required reading and stuff. Well, Leilani, you probably remember, what was that English teacher up there at DC Teachers? I had him for English 101. He had us talking about Agamemnon and all that Greek stuff. I'm telling you, but he did make it exciting. He made it something that you wanted to sit down and read, right? And I got all of those out there in the garage, and I keep telling myself, go back and read them again, because you enjoyed reading them the first time. You probably love reading them the second time, because now that I'm not under pressure to read them, I probably enjoy more reading them in my leisure.
Can you find them out there?
Huh?
Can you find them out there in the garage?
Yeah, I know exactly where they are. I know where they are. They're on the shelf over by the window. I know where they are.
Okay.
Good question. Good question.
You don't even have to go to the garage because you got a
That
whole
was
full of the great books that, and Encyclopedia Britannica, I'm sure still will crack when you open them.
I think I got rid of the encyclopedia. I don't think that's down there, but I think the great books are still there. I know the great books are still down there.
Yes.
If I read all of those great books, oh, I'll tell you, I'd be the smartest man on the planet. I mean, if you go through those great books and just look what they are about, you know, Archimedes, Plato, Sophocles, just everybody. There was somebody who wrote something in the past that turned out to be relevant. They're in the great books. And just to read them and find out how they thought and how they came to the conclusions that they came to, just fascinating, you know. I think that, but then I realized that they had a open world. Their world wasn't cluttered with a lot of junk. They had the skies, they had the environment, they weren't hampered by a whole lot of political stuff.
Right.
The things that we're confronted with today, they weren't confronted with that. And
but that's your view.
I recognize that
there were politics.
We got seven.
There were politics back then.
There were.
But they were exempt from the politics because they were the academics.
Well, how did
the academics were usually exempt?
Well, how did
plus they were in medicine and stuff like that. And then Sophocles, I forgot how he died, but his was a political situation.
Exactly. So they had to deal with the same thing. You're saying it wasn't political. Yeah. What I'm saying is they dealt with the same.
I'm saying it wasn't political like everything is today. Man. Well, for one thing, they didn't have 7 billion people on the planet to deal with.
True.
Right now, we got over 7 billion people on this planet, and that's a whole lot of ideas floating around. If you go all the way back then, it may not even been 1 million people on the whole planet. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
But what I like about the poetry thing is it told a story, and it told the story in a way that you don't understand it, and how they managed to do that rhyming, like Paul Laurence Dunbar, how they managed to rhyme and tell that story. And the story is a depiction of the time that they were living in. All that to me was just good stuff, man. And I'm pretty sure that the rappers of today are doing the same thing. They're just doing it a different way because their stuff rhymes and they're telling a story and they are trying to convince people of a lifestyle of some kind. And they got music to theirs now. Paul Laurence Dunbar and those poets, they didn't have music to theirs.
They didn't need it.
They didn't need it.
Uh,
They didn't need it. Just like Ann Lay said, you don't need it. They didn't need it.
they didn't need it. If they had it, what would they have done with it? They probably do the same thing the rappers.
It would have been
same thing the rappers are doing today.
Yeah. So talking about poetry, what's your favorite? I know a handful of poems that you have told me about over the years. And I can guess maybe what's in your top three. What are your top maybe 3 to 5 poems?
One is The Raven.
Okay.
By Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, yes.
I love The Raven. The Raven is a classic, man. That's good. Then I like The Party.
Paul Laurence.
Yeah, The Party was a good story. I'm trying to think of something outside of Paul Laurence Dunbar that really grabbed my attention. Nothing's coming to mind right now.
Okay, can I throw a couple of names out there? A couple of names of some poems that I remember you pointing out?
Yeah.
The Dash.
Yeah, sure.
The Dash.
Oh, right, The Dash. Yeah.
And then The Present or The Precious Present.
I don't remember that one.
You don't remember The Precious Present? I remember you just tell me always about that one. And then there was some Paul Laurence Dunbar. It's like the lawyer.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, there's several Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Yes.
There's at least almost 10 Paul Laurence Dunbars. When Melinda Sings.
Yeah.
That's one. Yeah, that's a good one. Accountability, where the guy stole the chicken and he came home trying to explain why he had this chicken he stole. I mean, yeah, Paul Laurence Dunbar is just full of stuff, man. But I'm trying to think of something outside of that. And outside of the Greek tragedies that may have guided how I think and feel about things today. I started taking Psychology Today magazine back in probably the early 60s. And I've been taking and reading it ever since. And I find the insights in there about human behavior just fascinating. You know, that's not something people usually like to talk about. People don't want to talk about feelings anymore. That's sort of like a taboo subject, right? But I like talking about feelings and why people do what they do. But nobody really wants to discuss that. It's almost like I remember when I was at Atlanta University and the psychology class that I was taking is Dr. Pasteur, Alfred Pasteur. He said that the more questions you ask a person about their personal stuff, as you get deeper down into their personal feelings, they will attack you. They will find a way to shut you off and get you away from getting very deep into their feelings. So I took that when I was working at Deal. And when the kids would come into the office sometimes with problems, I would play this little thing with them where I would I would always say anytime something came up, I would keep asking them, well, why did you say that? Or why did you do that? And no matter what answer they gave, you keep on. Well, why do you feel that way? Why do and after a while, that kid will start getting real angry because I was probing deep down into how they really felt about what they were doing, and they didn't want to discuss that. But it helped a lot because, especially when I had to deal with two kids who were fighting, I go into that. Why? And they'd explain, and I say, well, why? All you got to do is keep saying, well, why? Why? And after a while, they begin to realize that something's going on between them and this other person that they wanted to fight. And eventually it comes out, why they want to fight. And it usually had a lot to do with girls. If it was boys fighting, it was girls. If it was girls fighting, it was boys. If it wasn't that, it had a lot to do with their social situation, whether they were poor or whether they were well-to-do or whether they're in between. Something, but they couldn't express it until you kept asking them why. And as they kept trying to explain why, then it became evident. This is why. What's happening, Kayla?
Okay.
Hey.
Are you a scientist? Yes.
Yeah, I'm a scientist now.
Hey, good for you. I know your Uncle Sam would love it.
Hey.
Yeah, he would.
Yeah, he would love the idea that you're a scientist. I love it. I think science is that's another one of the fields that I think is just fascinating. Yeah, because there's so much that has been discovered and so much more to discover in the world of science. And I don't think people don't really look at science the way a scientific person would look at science. I look at everything as science, right? I mean, I don't think that there's very little in our physical world that is not science related somehow. I mean, we live in our whole world is science, and the basics. When I tell people the chair, the table that they're sitting at is moving, they look at me like I'm crazy. But scientifically speaking, the table is moving. It's stationary, but it's moving because it's made up of molecules, or whether it's molecules of iron, wood, plastic, whatever. And when you start looking at the components of molecules are electrons and protons and things. They're moving.
And
they're circling and moving around each other. That means that everything that they make up is moving.
Mm-hmm.
But it's at a stationary point when people look at it, but it's moving. I got that concept when I was taking physics and chemistry in high school. And when they start talking about electrons and protons and neutrons and all of these things, and we had to memorize the periodic table. We had to memorize it and be able to tell the teacher. If she asked what something was, we had to give the chemical equation for that. We had to be able to tell her. And not only that, we couldn't just say water was H2O. We had to explain what H2O meant. And then if she really wanted to challenge us, she would ask us, well, how many atoms of this and how many electrons and how many protons, all that stuff. but all the time teaching us that this world that we live in is really a chemical world. Just about everything we deal with in this world is made up of something from that periodic chart. And there's a lot going on, you know. That's a fascinating world. I would like to have been teach that. I would like to have been a teacher of that. But things didn't work out that way. Yeah. But I'm grateful for the way things work for me. And I'm grateful now for every decision that I have made, along with Teresa, to got us to the point where we were and where I am right now. One decision different, and my life may be entirely different than what it is today. One decision could have changed the whole path that I was on. And I've been on several paths, and all of them weren't positive. You know, I've been on some negative paths and survived. You know, I mean, by all rights, not rights, by all statistics, if I had not gone to St. Louis with Uncle Sam and Gwen, I probably would have gone to jail. I'm pretty sure of that because the people I was hanging with went to jail. And there's no reason for me to believe that I wouldn't have gone to jail right along with them because that's who I was hanging. I mean, one of them, Leilani, you know Bernard Levi, right? Well, I was hanging out with Bernard Levi, who one of the best basketball players DC ever had. But he did 15 years for armed robbery. And that's who I was with before I went to St. Louis. And before I went to stay over there with Earlene and then Uncle Sam and all that, I was with the wrong crowd. Ain't no question in my mind I was with the wrong crowd. Hell, if I wasn't with the wrong crowd, I wouldn't have failed the 9th grade, had to repeat the 10th grade. I mean, dropped out of Spingarn after half a year. Now, does that sound like somebody that's going to end up being an assistant principal of one of the best junior high schools in the city? And that's what I'm saying. My life took some turns that I have to be thankful for. And going from where I was to get to DC Teachers College, that was a big transformation in me. I changed everything that I was and went into something different. If I had not been able to do that, to make that transition, ain't no telling what kind of world I would have been living in.
Now, what do you
even when I got
to change too? Not just the people, but what sparked your wanting to
it was the people and the environment. Because once I started living with Sam and Gwen, I was exposed to educated people. I mean, I don't mean that all the other people before that weren't educated. I'm talking about college educated people, academic people. And they would be discussing things, and I had no idea what they were talking about. Nothing. because Sam, Sam, he had a lot of different jobs, but one of them was with these chemists who were working for FDA. And they would come over the house and be sitting down talking about science and chemistry and stuff like that. And I'd be sitting there with them. And I had no idea what they were talking about. But I was curious enough to stay there and listen and then go try to find out what they were talking about, ask questions, find out what did that mean? Why are you all saying, why was that funny? Like, when I had probably told you all when one of them guy came over, I think it was Julius Hobson, because Julius Hobson was another influence on me because he was so active in politics in DC. But he came over and wrote on a piece of paper, A U
H-I-H-O.
H-I.
H-O.
Yeah, right. And then they showed it to the guy and said, "What is that?" Well, they didn't know what the hell he was talking about, right? Until he told them it was high-ho silver. You know, that thing Lone Ranger used to do. Then they put another formula over there. I still don't know what that was, but it was, I know what he said it was. It was called a dihydroxy chicken wire fence. And it was the chemical equation that he put up there and how he drew it and everything. And they just fell out laughing. And to me, I didn't see the humor. I didn't know what they were doing, why it was so funny, right? And then I began to learn that this was different kind of humor than Red Fox and Nipsey Russell and all that stuff that I was used to. This was some different kind of humor. This was academic, educated humor, right? And I had to learn how to appreciate all of that, right? And that's what I got, some of that I got from Sam and Gwen. But the other thing was change the environment that a person is in, and you will change that person. If they stay in there long enough in that environment, they're going to change. And
It's
that's
called
what
Trading
happened.
Places. You ever seen the movie Trading Places?
Yes.
Trading Places.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exact same thing.
That's a great example. Trading Places. You put somebody in that environment, they're going to change. And that's part of what happened to me, because I came from one environment to an academic environment, and where things that were important were different from things that I was used to being important. And then it was understood, you going to college. Well, college, I had no, in fact, when it came time for me, and that's another thing about decisions. When it came time for me to go to college, I could go to DC Teachers College, or I could go to Howard University. I could go to Howard University at a reduced rate or almost nothing, because Sam was working at Howard University doing some experiments on enzymes with mice and stuff, right? And he took me up there and showed me some of the stuff he was doing. But because he was there, I could have gone to Howard University for little or nothing. But I chose to go to DC Teachers College because Gwen's mother, Mother Johnson, was a secretary to the dean of DC Teachers. She was a secretary to Dean Whitehead. So I said, well, I'm going over here with Mother Johnson. Another decision that changed the course of my life. And of course, I didn't do so well my first semester up there. the doctor, then later on, that Dr. Walker Thomas called me into his office, and he said, Mr. Broadus, what's the meaning of this report card you got here with all these D's and F's and withdrawal from classes and everything? I said, well, Dean, I'm going to tell you the truth. They didn't have a party I didn't go to. I said, I've been partying and having myself a good time. So he looked at me and he said, well, it's over now, right? The good time is over. If you're going to stay here, you're going to get off of this academic probation and you're going to start getting yourself right. Right? So another decision, I either get right or get out, you know. And it took me a long time to go to get through DC Teachers. I was up there from 1961 to 1969 to get one degree, And then after that, you know, now there are reasons, you know, I mean, we had Nicole working full time, trying to go to school full time, half time, anytime you can go. There were reasons why it took so long. But once I got there, then it was easy to get the master's degree. I got my master's degree at GW. That was easy. You know, after spending all that time getting that one degree, that master's was easy. And then when I went to Atlanta University to work on my EDD, my doctorate in education, I was rolling right along with that. In fact, I was on a Rockefeller Fellowship. And the school system was paying me part of my salary as a teacher, and then I was getting a stipend from Rockefeller. And I was using the stipend to come home almost every weekend so that I didn't leave Teresa there all that time with Nicole and them, you know. And that was another decision. But when she got sick and I came home, I never looked back. And that was another good decision I think I made. I needed her more than I needed that degree. And after 14 months down there working on that thing, I decided to give that up and come home. And that was probably a good decision too. That was a good, because I came home, things started falling. Dr. Minus, who was the principal of the school, went downtown to work. Reggie Moss, who was the assistant principal, moved into the principalship. That left his position open as the assistant principal, and they gave that to me. So it's all of those decisions sort of helped me get along with my life, you know. Of course, I know all this ain't got nothing to do with poetry, but it's you know, if you're gonna write a book, that's part of the story of the book. How I got from where I was to where I am. And I'm not so sure that I wouldn't have had a richer life if I had spent more time with my father's people. I don't really know my father's people, but I know there's a rich heritage there that I missed out on because I didn't take the time to get to know them. I know all my mother's people. I know every one of them. I know all of them, all their children and everything. But my father, and there was 7 of them, half as many as my mother, really. But I don't really know them. And now a lot of them are gone, and I never will get to know them, right? And that's one of the things out there. I started going down there with Herbert because he was bowling. and I would be the designated driver. We did this for maybe 2 or 3 years, where he would drive down and I would drive back, because once we got down at Aunt Gus's house, it was corn, liquor, and poker until the time to go to the bowling alley. And by the time they got to the bowling alley, they were fired up. So I had to be the one to drive us back to D.C. at night. And not that I didn't have a drink or two myself, but not as much as they did, right? And that was fun. And I got to know Barbara, and I got to know Julie Mae Moore. I got to know Herbert real well. I got to know John. And, but I didn't get to know all of the other family outside of them. And now they are the only one left down there now that I know is John. All the Aunt Gus's kids are dead. John is the only one still alive. Well, John and Lloyd, they're two. Lloyd, we don't even see him that much. But I really wish I had learned them as much as I learned all the Newberries and the Morgans. And I really don't know that much about the Morgans. Arnetta is a Morgan. And I don't know much about them. Austin knew a lot about them. Dimples knows some of them. But I don't know a lot of Arnetta's people, and they are really a big part of the origin of the family. The Morgans and the Douglases, they're a big part of the family, of the family history. And I don't know them. Not really. I know Putty, and I know Peters. I know Peter's brother. I know the brother's son because he went to deal, Jabal. But the rest of them, I really don't know. And they're here. They're right here in Washington, D.C. And I don't know.
What stops you from reaching out?
I didn't know. I have no idea. I just don't. I call Arnetta. I do talk to Arnetta occasionally. Arnetta don't call you back though. And T, her husband, Mr. T, he and I got along pretty good because he was into bowling.
Right.
And he drilled my bowling balls for me. He drilled the holes in my bowling ball. He was multi-talented. He wasn't just a hairdresser. He taught himself how to play piano. I mean, Mr. T was something else. You had to get to know him. He was a pretty fascinating guy. But yeah, I did know T. And I know Trina a little bit. I mostly know Trina because her daughter went to Deal. That's another story there. The number of kids that I got into Deal that ain't had no business in Deal. Because I was in the position I was in, I could get kids into Deal that they had no business in there. Oh yeah, he was my failure. I couldn't change him. I don't care what I did, boy. I put that paddle on him one day up there. He wouldn't change. That boy, he was determined he was going to be with the thugs.
Who's that?
He was going to be with the ones that wasn't going to do right. I couldn't reach him.
Who's that?
And he was smart. David was smart. And when David was staying here, when they were staying here with me and Teresa, right? And he was going to the little babysitter around the corner there. It just amazed me how smart he was. He had a hell of a memory. He was just smart. I couldn't figure out what happened. How he changed from what I saw him growing up, what I saw when he was growing up, to what he was doing when he got the deal. I said to myself, it's like, are you the same person? You know, and I tried to talk to him. I tried to remind him, you know, that he was reflecting on the family. Because everybody knew he was my nephew. They called him my nephew, right? But I couldn't do anything with him. Nothing. And he lived here with us. Couldn't do anything with Demetria. She lived here with us. You know that Teresa and I had 26 people living with us during our marriage for different lengths of time. Teresa and I sat down one night and counted 26 different people came to live with us for different periods of time during our marriage.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. I even had 2 teachers come and stay because their husbands were acting up. Yes. And I told you, man, we had it all. We had it all. But it was good. It was all good.
All right, then I'm gonna end that here. The recording part.
Damn, you mean something about